Over 20 years, Britomart has gone from a rough area into what it is today. A shiny mix of shops, bars, restaurants, cafes and new builds against the backdrop of beautifully restored heritage buildings. I've covered the story of urban regeneration, and today we're going to dive into the incredible makeover of this precinct into one of Auckland's coolest neighbourhoods.
When I came across this big hole in the ground here with these abandoned derelict warehouses occupied by seagulls and squatters, and I remembered what it used to be like with this big car park in the middle. Ugly car park actually. So I went to council and I said, well, what are you going to do with this amazing opportunity? And they were going to build a new car park there, replace the one that had been torn down, and then sell off all the sites. And I said, oh no, you can't do that. It's a travesty. It's such an opportunity in terms of making this into a precinct and restoring the buildings and what an amazing place it could be. So I talked to them along those lines for 2 years, and then they pulled it all together and put it out as a public offering and invited me to bid.
Cheshire Architects sort of emerged from the creation of Britomart. My father, Pip Cheshire, and Peter Cooper had worked together for a number of years. The securing of Britomart as a project in some ways was predicated on Pip forming a practice almost solely dedicated to the creation of the precinct. And so he had been managing director of the largest practice in the country. He'd built that and left it to start almost from scratch to make this place with Peter. And I had the smallest practice in the country. I had one employee, and Pip asked if I might join him in that kind of adventure. And so we launched, and we were here. We were one floor below this. The building was derelict. We had improvised a studio, and we set to trying to imagine the future.
I'd spent a lot of time in Italy and looking at squares, and I just loved the fact in Italy was a place where people gathered. They didn't ever, have coffee at home. They'd come down to the square, and it was very social and convivial. So it seemed to me that we need to make the square compatible with what I'd seen in Italy in terms of size, and then create really a gathering place, and so that was the aspiration.
The mixture in old and new has been baked into this place from the outset. I think the city threw out an entire mayoralty on the basis that it was going to demolish what was old here, and for a decade beforehand the free market and a surge in capital meant that the city had been, the old city of Auckland had been destroyed in a very few years, and this was almost all that remained. And so it was just a collection of dockside warehouses, but by scarcity they were tremendously precious. And as architects, what we were taught first was humility, that it seemed to us when we were making restaurants and bars and cafes and the places that people lived their lives, that a sort of carefully choreographed building held in stasis in its decline, a century or so after its making, was richer and had more integrity than anything we could make from scratch. It's quite confronting for an architect, but it's also quite exhilarating. And so after that point of recognition, the challenge for the new work was simply to live up to being the sort of neighbour to the old buildings that would elevate both. So it led us to make a kind of building we thought that didn't really seem to have an author. We didn't want our hand to be visible. We wanted the new buildings to feel almost as if they had a kind of inevitability, and that they had simply organically emerged from this place rather than being kind of sculptural gems that we had placed in it.
I think it is a theatre, quite frankly, and we have events here every day, and bags out people can sit in, and we have all the food trucks come once a week, and we have events on in the evening, and so I think it's probably that I'm most proud of, that I think we did what we sort of aspired to do and created live theatre here.